In the quiet hills of northern Texas, just outside a town where everybody still waves from their trucks, Luke McCarty lived a life most men dream of. He was a broad-shouldered ex-tier fighter, hands worn from years of raising cattle and building barns with nothing but raw grit and steel. His 14-acre ranch had been in his family since his grandfather settled it after World War II. Luke's wife, Alyssa, didn't look like she belonged out there, not at first glance. She was polished, clean lines, the kind of woman you'd assume worked at a firm in Dallas or flew out weekly to D.C., which, funnily enough, wasn't too far from the truth, because while neighbors whispered about her mysterious work trips and her government-plated SUV, none of them knew who Alyssa McCarty really was. To the Oak Creek Meadows Homeowners Association. Alyssa was just another ranch wife who didn't read the rulebook, and to Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, Alyssa was a threat. Not because of anything Alyssa had said or done, but because Karen hated what she couldn't control. Karen was small in stature, but made up for it with volume and threats. She'd been president of the HOA for 4 years, too long, and she ruled the neighborhood like a petty dictator measuring mailbox heights, demanding fines for leaving trash bins out 15 minutes past pickup, and banning unauthorized boots on common land, whatever that meant. One morning, a white envelope arrived at the McCarty ranch. It wasn't handed, it was taped to their main gate, where it flapped in the warm wind like a warning flag. Luke pulled it down and read it with furrowed brows. Alyssa stood beside him, silent, her coffee steaming in hand. Violation of Section 8.12, unauthorized government vehicle parked on HOA-maintained gravel road. Further violations may result in fines, legal action, or eviction proceedings. Luke snorted. She's lost her damn mind. Alyssa didn't respond. She simply took the letter from his hands, folded it twice, and tucked it into her jacket pocket. You okay? Luke asked. I've dealt with worse, Alyssa said calmly, but Karen doesn't know that yet. She walked inside, straight-backed, composed. Luke watched her disappear through the screen door and muttered, she's poked the wrong bear. That night, Alyssa sat at her desk long after the horses were fed, and the porch light buzzed with bugs. She opened her secure laptop. Her fingers moved with practiced speed, typing access codes and rooting through encrypted channels. Karen had no idea who she was dealing with. She thought Alyssa was some quiet housewife who'd fold at the first threat, but Alyssa had dealt with cartel leaders, foreign diplomats, and cyber criminals with deeper pockets than Texas oil men. She wasn't just an FBI agent, she was the director, and she had just been given a reason to take a personal interest in Karen. Before logging off, Alyssa opened a second file. It was titled, Oak Creek Meadows HOA, Surveillance Begins. She clicked record. A pause, then a whisper. Let's see what Karen really wants. The camera light blinked on. And somewhere in a gated neighborhood too proud of its signage, the clock started ticking on Karen's little empire. 2 days after the warning letter, a second notice appeared on the gate. This time, it was printed on neon pink paper. Immediate violation. Trash can placed more than 18 inches from authorized enclosure. Fine, $175. Next offense will trigger HOA legal review board. Luke shook his head. 18 inches. She's measuring with a damn ruler now. Alyssa glanced at the paper but didn't say a word. She was in the middle of a silent breakfast, her focus fixed on her phone. Her screen showed a grainy camera feed, the gravel road near the gates. A woman with a short bob and oversized sunglasses could be seen holding a measuring tape. She's escalating, Alyssa said. Luke took a sip of his coffee. Should we say something to her? Alyssa stood. No, she wants attention. I'm gathering data. That afternoon, Karen arrived in person. No warning, no appointment. She stomped across the gravel, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. Her husband, a pale, nervous man named Carl, stood several paces behind her, eyes glued to his shoes. Karen knocked hard on the front door. Before Luke could reach it, she had already begun shouting, "This is private HOA business. Your wife is under review for multiple violations. This is your final notice before legal steps begin." Luke opened the door. He didn't smile. "You're trespassing," he said flatly. Karen pushed past him like she owned the wood floors. "I don't care if you've been here 50 years. Rules are rules. And your little government car over there, it's parked illegally on a shared access road. That makes it an emergency concern." Alyssa appeared from the hallway.com/collected, dressed like she was headed to the farmer's market. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Karen," she said, voice low and cool, "do you know what constitutes an emergency concern? Under Texas statute." Karen blinked. "What?" "I asked if you know what legally qualifies as an emergency concern in this state," Karen stammered. "Well, If it's a violation of the HOA, Alyssa cut her off. The law doesn't bend for HOA paranoia. You trespassed. Again, you're harassing a homeowner. Again, and you're falsely claiming emergency authority. Karen's jaw twitched. I'm the president of this association. Alyssa took one slow step forward. And I'm the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The room fell silent. Karen let out a confused laugh. That's a funny joke. Alyssa didn't blink. I wasn't joking. Karen's face flushed. She looked at Luke, then back to Alyssa. If you think saying that intimidates me, Karen, Alyssa interrupted. The only reason you're not in a holding cell this morning is because I still believe in giving people rope. Whether they use it to climb or hang themselves, that's up to them. Karen stepped back like she'd touched a live wire. But before she left, she muttered something under her breath. Alyssa caught every word. She thinks she's better than everyone. We'll see what the board says about that. The door slammed behind her. That night, Luke walked out to the porch with a beer in hand. Alyssa sat next to him, tablet in her lap, surveillance footage playing. She zoomed in on Karen's SUV. A few frames later, Karen could be seen pulling out a second trash can from the McCarty's side yard and dragging it into an unauthorized position. Then she took photos. She staged the violation, Alyssa said, and she left prints. Luke shook his head in disbelief. She's trying to railroad us out of our own place. This is war now. Alyssa didn't respond. She rewound the footage again, frame by frame, then paused. Wait, she enlarged the license plate of Karen's SUV. Beneath the dust and grime was something interesting, an expired registration tag. For months out of date. She saved a screenshot. I'm going to give her one more warning, Alyssa said quietly, but not with words. By Thursday, word had spread that an emergency HOA meeting had been scheduled at the Oak Creek Meadows clubhouse. It was Karen's doing. She'd printed flyers and stapled them to mailboxes, titled in all caps, Community Stability Under Threat. She blamed non-compliant homeowners for disturbing the neighborhood's image and promised a decisive vote on fines and potential removals. It didn't say the McCarty's names directly, but everyone knew who the target was. Luke wasn't interested in going. He preferred to let people run their mouths while he focused on fence posts and feed schedules. But Alyssa had other plans. That evening, she walked out of the bedroom dressed in denim jeans, boots, and a plain black t-shirt. No badge, no makeup, no fanfare. She tucked a slim manila folder under her arm. Luke raised an eyebrow. You're going? I am. You bringing backup? I am the backup. The clubhouse sat near the edge of the development, right before the ranch land turned into open hills. Inside, a folding table stretched across the front like a courtroom bench. Karen stood behind it with her usual smug posture, clipboard in hand, voice already echoing. We are here because certain individuals have ignored repeat violations and endangered the values of our properties. And as president, she stopped. Mid-sentence when Alyssa walked in. It was quiet. Too quiet. Even the man chewing sunflower seeds near the wall froze. Karen blinked twice, then forced a smile. Well, glad you could join us. I wasn't sure if you'd bother. Alyssa walked slowly to the back row. She took her seat without a word. Karen kept her voice steady, but the nerves cracked her smile. As I was saying, when residents ignore regulations, it's our duty to preserve standards, especially those who think government plates give them special privileges. There were a few murmurs. One man chuckled awkwardly. Another woman shook her head. Karen motioned to the board members beside her, 3 of whom avoided eye contact. Entirely, we've reviewed the recent complaints. Trash violations, unauthorized vehicle parking, and disruptive gatherings. Some of us feel it's time to vote on a formal action. Alyssa stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't make a scene. She simply walked to the front, set the manila folder on the table, and opened it. This contains every violation notice issued to my home, she said. I've recorded the date, time, and contents. But more importantly, I've provided evidence that each one was either fabricated, exaggerated, or staged. Karen's mouth opened, but Alyssa kept going. I have surveillance footage of someone moving trash cans. I have fingerprints. I have time-stamped images, and I have proof of deliberate targeting. She turned to the room. Now ask yourselves, has anyone else here received these kinds of notices, or does it seem like they're aimed at one family? People started shifting in their chairs. One man raised his hand. Karen, fine me last month because I trimmed my hedges on a Monday. Another woman added, she threatened to fine me for having yellow mums instead of white. Karen's face went pale. Alyssa reached into the folder again and removed a slim badge holder. She opened it slowly and laid it on the table. The room was dead silent. The seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation gleamed under the overhead lights. "I haven't come here to intimidate anyone," she said, "but I do need to make something clear. Falsifying violations for personal gain is harassment. Abusing elected roles to target individuals is misconduct. And using fear to control others. That ends tonight." Karen took a half step back. "This is ridiculous," she spat. "You're using your job to scare people. You think you're better than the rest of us just because you carry a badge." Alyssa looked her dead in the eyes. "I don't think I'm better. I just think I'm better prepared." Someone clapped in the back. Then another. It was awkward at first, like no one knew if they were allowed. But the tension cracked. Applause spread across the room. Karen turned red, then purple. She grabbed her clipboard and stormed out. The board didn't stop her. No vote was held that night. Alyssa walked out calmly. Luke already waiting by the truck. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. As they drove off into the dark, Alyssa checked her phone. A message had just come in from a contact in Washington. Local subject under watchlist review. Digging into Karen Whitmore's financials. "You were right to flag her," Alyssa smiled. The meeting was over, but Karen's story was just beginning. 2 days passed. The skies above Oak Creek Meadows shifted from bright Texas blue to heavy overcast gray, the kind of weather that felt like something was about to snap. Luke was fixing the corner fence post near the cattle line when Alyssa's phone buzzed twice. In her jacket pocket, the message was short. "Got something. Check your inbox." She left the hammering to Luke and walked into the barn office, where her secured tablet sat on a steel desk between dusty tack hooks and an old framed photo of her at Quantico. The file loaded slowly for comfort, but when it finally opened, Alyssa sat perfectly still. Karen Whitmore had more than HOA skeletons in her closet. She had a sealed bankruptcy filing from 8 years ago, 2 lawsuits both dismissed, but with suspicious timing, and a brother-in-law tied to a real estate scam in Nevada involving land flipping, zoning bribes, and laundering hundreds of thousands through shell HOAs. One name came up again and again. Claremont Holdings, a real estate group known for buying up neighborhoods, installing puppet HOA boards, and then flipping entire developments into luxury lots with inflated dues. One of their main recruiters, Karen Whitmore, listed as an advisory board consultant 6 years ago. Alyssa leaned back in her chair. This wasn't about barking dogs or trash cans. Karen was running a quiet setup, one piece at a time, pressuring homeowners with fines and violations, pushing them to sell or leave while likely taking back-end payments from development companies waiting to swoop in. She looked out the barn window. The clouds had turned gunmetal gray. That night, Alyssa sat with Luke by the fire pit behind the barn. The stars were gone, and the wind kept flipping the pages of her leather notebook. Luke tossed another log onto the fire. "You've got that? Look again." "What look?" "The one you had right before you arrested that city controller in Austin." She handed him the file. Luke flipped through it slowly. When he hit the page showing the Claremont Holdings web of shell LLCs, he whistled. "This is bigger than HOA drama," he muttered. "She's not just on a power trip," Alyssa said. "She's laying groundwork. And if she's targeting us, she's probably doing the same to other owners who refuse to sell. Then it's time to let people know." "Not yet," she said. "I want to catch her making the move herself." Next morning, Alyssa installed a second surveillance camera. Not on their property, just outside the ranch line where Karen's car liked to linger. Motion triggered, silent, disguised as a rusted gate sensor. Luke called it overkill. Alyssa called it leverage. That evening, the camera caught movement. Karen stepped out of her car with a clipboard, sunglasses, and a younger man in a suit. They stood by the edge of the ranch fence, pointing, talking, walking up and down the line. Alyssa recognized the man. He worked for Claremont Holdings. She remembered his face from a zoning board hearing 2 years ago in El Paso, where land had mysteriously shifted hands after 3 families were forced out over obscure HOA violations. The video caught audio, too, faint but clear enough. Karen's voice, "They've resisted every notice. But with one more violation, we can declare non." Man's voice, "Good. Once you clear it, we'll move on the purchase." That night, Alyssa clipped the video segment, packaged the documents, and prepared 3 copies. One for the sheriff's office, one for a federal colleague who specialized in real estate corruption, and one that she'd deliver personally to the Oak Creek Meadows board. But first, she had one more play. The next morning, every mailbox in the neighborhood had a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a still image of Karen, caught on camera, standing with the Claremont agent beside the ranch fence, clipboard in hand, and beneath it, in clean black letters, "She's not protecting your homes. She's selling them behind your backs. By noon, phones were ringing, text chains lit up. People gathered on porches, angry, confused, demanding answers. And Karen, she was nowhere to be seen, but her car. It was parked outside a law office 30 miles away. Saturday morning began with the smell of mesquite and slow-cooked brisket drifting through Oak Creek meadows. Luke had been up since dawn, trimming meat and stoking the fire pit behind the barn. A dozen coolers stood in the shade, full of drinks, sausage links, and enough homemade potato salad to feed a small battalion. That it wasn't just a backyard get-dashed together, it was a message. Every neighbor who had been fined, harassed or warned by Karen over the past year was invited. And judging by the line of parked trucks stretching down the gravel lane, nearly everyone showed up. There were local ranchers, volunteer firefighters, a few sheriff's deputies, off-duty, and even a state senator who happened to be an old friend of Luke's from high school. Some people brought folding chairs, others brought side dishes. The rule was simple. If Karen had threatened you with a violation, you got a plate first. By noon, the music was playing, the ribs were sizzling, and laughter rolled across the hills. It felt like a different town altogether, one where people were finally saying what they really thought. Then Karen showed up. Her SUV turned onto the gravel road like a vulture, circling too low. She parked halfway up the drive and stepped out wearing dark sunglasses and a wide-brimmed sun hat, clipboard in hand, like she was about to do a tax audit at a rodeo. People stopped laughing. Conversations dropped to murmurs. All eyes turned to her. Alyssa watched from under the barn awning. She didn't move, didn't blink. Just let Karen walk straight into the lion's den. Karen cleared her throat loudly as she marched past the smoker. This gathering is unauthorized, she announced. There was no request submitted for a public event of this size, and there are well over the legal limit of 25 attendees for a private gathering under HOA guidelines. Nobody responded. Some didn't even look at her. Others turned their backs and kept eating. Karen pressed on. If this isn't broken up within the hour, I'll have to begin writing citations. And if the McCartys refuse to comply, further legal steps will be taken, including emergency hearings. Alyssa finally stepped forward. No badge, no uniform, just calm authority wrapped in boots and denim. You seem very concerned about rules today, Karen. Karen turned, posture stiff. This is not your personal parade. You've made a mockery of this neighborhood, and what's worse, you're spreading lies. I know about the mailer. That was slander. Alyssa didn't flinch. Everything in that mailer is backed by video, documents, and verified names. It's not slander if it's true. Karen's voice rose. You're not above the law just because you worked for some agency. I don't work for an agency, Alyssa said. I lead one. Karen laughed, nervous and fake. Right? And I'm the Queen of England. A man near the food line stepped forward. It was Deputy Nolan off duty, but still in uniform from an earlier shift. She's telling the truth, he said calmly. You're talking to the director of the FBI. Karen's face twisted like she'd been slapped. This is outrageous. She's using intimidation to silence criticism. The senator stepped forward next. You want to talk about intimidation? I've seen the complaints. I've read the reports. And I've watched the footage. You've been abusing your role. For years, Karen's hands shook as she raised her clipboard. This is an illegal gathering. There are cars parked along the fire lane. You're blocking access. No one's blocking anything, Luke said as he leaned against the barn. You just don't like not being in control. Karen looked around and saw it. The shift, no one was backing her anymore. The people who used to nod along in meetings were now standing with arms crossed. Some shaking their heads, others recording on their phones. Alyssa stepped closer, voice low. Consider this your final warning. The evidence has already been submitted. The charges are forming. The only choice you have now is whether you walk away quietly or get dragged out loud. Karen opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Then she turned and stormed back to her SUV, clipboard flapping in her hand like a broken flag. She didn't look back. The party resumed slowly at first. Then laughter returned, louder than before. Plates filled, songs played, and by sunset, no one even mentioned her name, except Alyssa. Late that night, after most guests had gone, she handed Luke a sealed envelope. What's this? He asked her. Resignation draft, Alyssa said. Found it in a digital backup folder she didn't encrypt properly. She was planning to step down quietly after the deal closed. You think she still will? No, Alyssa said. Now she have to be pushed. By Monday morning, the clubhouse was locked. The HOA office email auto-replied with a generic message, and Karen's usual morning patrol was suspiciously absent. Something had shifted and everyone in Oak Creek Meadows could feel it. Alyssa had already sent her evidence packet to the Bureau's Real Estate and Corruption Unit. She hadn't expected a response so fast, but the files she provided, combined with Karen's pattern of manufactured violations and financial pressure tactics, had triggered something bigger. That afternoon, 2 unmarked government vehicles rolled into the development. Men in suits walked door to door, not to question homeowners, but to quietly request cooperation. They weren't loud. They didn't need to be. By evening, the whispers had become a wildfire. Alyssa didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She watched from the porch, arms folded, as neighbors gathered in small groups on their lawns, trading stories and connecting dots. Luke walked out with a pair of iced lemonades and handed her one. "You think she's packing up?" he asked. "She's trying to, but she's already under review." Sure enough, Karen's SUV was missing by morning, but she hadn't left town. Just moved temporarily to a friend's house outside the HOA limits, someone who hadn't realized what storm they'd invited in. Meanwhile, the rest of the board, 3 members in total, received formal subpoenas. One of them, a soft-spoken retired architect named Greg Whitner, broke first. He contacted Alyssa through her bureau email and confessed to signing off on violation letters he didn't write. She said it was routine. Greg explained in a call, said it was easier to push certain folks out. Said it was just cleaning up the community. He wasn't the only one. Over the next 48 hours, residents came forward. Handwritten notes, voicemails, and even screenshots from group chats, all showing Karen coordinating efforts to overwhelm homeowners with violations, while quietly referring their properties to buyers linked to Claremont Holdings. One neighbor revealed Karen had offered to waive future fines if she agreed to sell at a discounted price and recommend the neighborhood to developer friends. Another found their signature forged on a ballot approving an HOA budget. Karen never published. But the real hammer dropped on Thursday. The county zoning office, after being contacted by federal investigators, placed a hold on all planned development deals within the Oak Creek Meadows district pending a full audit of HOA documentation and transactions that included Karen's side deals and Claremont's proposed land purchase contracts. The ranch wasn't just safe, it was now ground zero in an active federal investigation. Karen tried to spin it. She sent out an emergency newsletter claiming she was stepping away for personal wellness and that rumors of misconduct were politically motivated. But it didn't work. No one believed her anymore. At a spontaneous neighborhood assembly organized in the clubhouse parking lot without HOA approval, new residents stood up and read aloud from a letter. This HOA, under the previous leadership, acted outside its authority, manipulated trust, and exploited power for personal gain. We, the residents of Oak Creek Meadows, call for a vote of no confidence. The applause was immediate, overwhelming. Karen's allies shrank into the background. No one spoke in her defense. Luke leaned over to Alyssa and whispered, "It's done," but she shook her head. Not yet. Later that night, Alyssa reviewed the last of the footage her cameras had captured. One clip showed Karen, late one evening before the barbecue, returning to the fence line with a flashlight. She held something in her hand, looked like papers. She glanced around and tucked them under a loose fence post. It wasn't just trash cans and scare tactics anymore. It was concealment. Alyssa headed out with a flashlight of her own. The papers were there, damp, crumpled but legible. They were contract drafts, sale agreements, some signed, others partially filled, all tied to Claremont Holdings. One line caught Alyssa's eye. Upon successful removal of owner via legal process, commission bonus to be released within 5 business days. The language was clear, cold, and criminal. Alyssa looked up into the dark. Karen hadn't just bent the rules. She'd weaponized them for profit. The next morning, Alyssa delivered the final set of evidence to her contact in the Dallas field office. The case was complete. The last signature, the last video clip, the last buried document, it all fit together. Karen had tried to turn a neighborhood into a chessboard, but the queen always falls when she forgets who's watching the board. The morning air over Oak Creek Meadows felt different. It wasn't just cooler, it was lighter, like something heavy had been peeled off the rooftops and swept into the hills. For the first time in months, neighbors stopped to chat on the road. The tension that had quietly smothered the community under Karen's rule had cracked wide open, but Karen wasn't finished. Not yet. Her resignation email had never arrived. Her allies had gone silent. Her face hadn't been seen on any porch since the audit began, but late that Friday night, a document was filed at the county courthouse under emergency petition, a legal motion requesting an immediate injunction against the McCartys for community destabilization, slanderous activity, and reputational harm to the HOA. Alyssa received the court alert at 3:12 a.m. She read every word, twice, then calmly brewed a pot of coffee, walked out onto the porch, and let the stars blink silently overhead while the heat of Karen's final mistake settled in. Karen had tried to silence them, legally, publicly, desperately. The injunction motion wasn't just outrageous, it was sloppy. Buried on page 5 was the evidence Karen submitted, a handful of screenshots, out-of-context surveillance stills, and even a copy of the same mailer Alyssa had sent to warn the neighbors. Karen had labeled it false propaganda, but what she didn't know was that Alyssa had already submitted every single one of those same exhibits to federal investigators with full context, full authentication, and supporting witness statements. And one more thing, Karen's motion claimed the McCartys violated HOA code by constructing structures and modifying land within association-controlled boundaries. That was the moment. Alyssa smiled because that's where Karen had made her biggest mistake. According to property records that hadn't been updated in the HOAS database since the 1970s, the McCarty Ranch had never technically fallen under Oak Creek Meadows jurisdiction. The HOA boundaries stopped exactly 20 feet short of their property line. Always had. That meant everything Karen had ever issued to them. Every fine, every warning, every violation was based on false jurisdiction. Alyssa contacted her legal advisor at dawn. A single email, with one line. She's trying to evict us from land we don't legally share. By noon, Alyssa and Luke walked into the county courtroom for the emergency hearing. Karen was already there, standing in front of the judge with a new attorney. She was dressed neatly, her hair freshly styled, a new pearl necklace clinging to her throat like it might keep her dignity from slipping too far. She smiled as Alyssa entered. It didn't last long. Judge Harlan, a man known for his no-nonsense temperament and deep dislike for neighborhood drama cases, read through the motion in silence. Then he looked over his glasses and cleared his throat. You're asking me to silence a homeowner's speech on property that, according to these documents, your association has ***, no legal claim over whatsoever. Karen's attorney hesitated. We were unaware of you. We're unaware because your client filed actions without confirming jurisdiction. That's not just sloppy. That's negligent, possibly criminal, considering the circumstances. Karen's face drained of color. Luke leaned closer to Alyssa. She just lost. But Alyssa wasn't smiling yet, because what came next was more than a dismissal. Judge Harlan leaned forward. This court finds that the plaintiff, Karen Whitmore, knowingly misrepresented the boundaries of her authority in multiple formal actions and attempted to pursue unlawful eviction and fines against private citizens. This motion is not only denied, it is being forwarded for review by the district attorney's office for possible charges related to fraud, harassment, and perjury. Karen didn't speak. Couldn't the room echoed with the quiet creak of courtroom benches. The judge turned to Alyssa. You've shown remarkable restraint, Director McCarty. Alyssa gave a small nod. I've been trained for harder battles. When it was over, Karen walked out of the courtroom flanked by her lawyer, now whispering urgent warnings. She kept her eyes down. No sunglasses, no clipboard. Just a woman walking away from the power she thought was hers forever. But that power had never belonged to her. She'd just borrowed it, abused it, and now it was gone. That afternoon, the entire neighborhood received an official bulletin from the county. It confirmed that the McCarty Ranch had been mistakenly included in HOA filings, that they owed 0 fines, and that all violations issued by Karen Whitmore were to be considered null and void. And tucked at the bottom, a single line, Karen Whitmore has been formally removed from all HOA-related duties pending criminal investigation. Luke folded the paper and handed it to Alyssa. It's finally over. She shook her head. Not yet. One more piece left. He raised an eyebrow. Claremont Holdings, she said. They're not done, but neither am I. 2 weeks passed. The hills of Oak Creek Meadows breathed easier now. Kids played in front yards again. Neighbors waved without worry. And the mailbox patrols, once Karen's favorite pastime, had come to a silent end. Karen hadn't been seen since the court hearing. Her house sat dark most nights. Rumor had it she was staying with relatives. Others said she was talking to lawyers, hoping to cut a deal before the full investigation reached sentencing. But Alyssa didn't care about Karen anymore. Her focus had shifted because Claremont Holdings, development company quietly behind Karen's years-long scheme, was still very much active. And they weren't just targeting Oak Creek Meadows. They were targeting neighborhoods across the country, but they'd made one mistake. They underestimated who lived on that last ranch on the edge of town. Alyssa sat in her barn office, staring at a national zoning map on her screen. dozens of red pins marked communities where Claremont had quietly acquired HOA leadership, forced homeowners out, and flipped land for profit often within weeks. But this time, the evidence was going somewhere it couldn't be buried. She picked up the phone and made the call. The voice on the other end answered quickly. Deputy Director Jensen, package complete, Alyssa said. I'm sending the report. About time. How bad is it? It's not just predatory development. It's organized fraud, multi-state, multi-agency. And Karen Whitmore wasn't a lone operator, she was a recruiter. There was silence. Then a low whistle. You realize what you're handing us, don't you? Alyssa smiled. Yeah, I do. By nightfall, a task force was spinning up out of Washington, and Alyssa's filed 32 pages of whistleblower reports, surveillance footage, tampered ballots, falsified code enforcement letters, and payoff ledgers was the key evidence. But she wasn't quite done. That weekend, she held one last gathering. No brisket, no speeches, just a quiet community circle at the McCarty Ranch with homemade lemonade and folding chairs under string lights. Neighbors thanked her. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner. Others simply said they finally felt like they could breathe again. Luke stood at the grill, flipping a few burgers anyway. Still don't understand how you find time to take down white-collar crime rings and make a mean potato salad, he said. Alyssa laughed. I've had practice. Then a red truck pulled into the driveway. Everyone turned. Karen stepped out. Not in her usual shades. No clipboard. Just jeans, a faded blouse, and an expression somewhere between humiliation and desperation. Every conversation stopped. Karen walked toward Alyssa, hands slightly raised. I didn't come here to fight. Alyssa stayed seated. Karen continued. They cut me off. Claremont. After the audit, after the board fallout, they ghosted me. Said I was a liability. They used me. Alyssa sipped her lemonade. You let them. I thought it would just be one neighborhood, then another, then another. They promised bonuses, power, a position if I could clear out. The resistance. You were the resistance, Alyssa said, before they bought you. Karen looked down. I didn't know who you were. I didn't know you had connections. That's the problem. You thought it would matter who I was. You didn't stop to think what you were doing. Karen's eyes were glassy. What happens now? Alyssa stood. What happens now is you cooperate, testify, hand over everything. If you do, you might walk out of this without a federal conviction. But if you don't, she'll let the silence hang. Karen nodded. I'll cooperate. She turned and left without another word. Not one neighbor followed her. No one offered a wave. Later that night, as the crowd thinned and the porch lights dimmed, Alyssa's phone buzzed one last time. Message from Deputy Director Jensen. HQ approved. You've got the green light. National investigation opened. Claremont is finished. Nice work, Director. Luke walked up, stretching his arms. So, that it. Alyssa looked out over the land. The hills were quiet, peaceful. For now, she said, but they'll try again somewhere else. And you'll stop them. I'll make sure they never start. They stood together in silence as the wind moved through the ranch. Grass. Karen had tried to evict the wrong woman, and in doing so, she exposed a web of corruption that was finally unraveling. The end.